Welcome everybody to the Veriswap YouTube channel. Today we have Zach Robbins from Hobby.exchange. How's it going, Zach?
Hey, doing great, Raymond. Yourself?
I am doing well. It's very sunny, and I don't know if you noticed, but I had to pull down the shades because it's so sunny today. So, it's always a great day when you can tan indoors.
Absolutely.
The background in your backyard looks pretty lush too. So,
Thanks, man. I'm calling from the Twin Cities, from Minneapolis, and it's one of the rougher climates. So I try to sort of squeeze out and eke out every moment of summertime that I can. So try to work outside, hopefully for the next 30 days or so before I have to go back indoors for 3 or 4 months of hibernation.
3 to 4 months of hibernation. That's a lot more than I can. It's a lot more than I can stand. But at least that's more time to spend with your cards, right?
There you go.
If all the cards are inside, you get more time to deal with that in the summer. The outdoors you can kind of think of as almost a distraction.
Love it. Good call.
But Zach, can you tell me a little bit about your experience in the hobby for those who might not have met or know about you?
Sure. Very, very similar story to so many others. I collected as a kid, was obsessed with it, huge passion. We had a baseball card shop in my hometown in Ohio. I used to ride my bike there with my friends. Inherited a card collection from my brothers, and so it was a big part of my youth. And then, like so many others, it just sort of disappeared, right? Obviously the hobby ran into tough times, just due to sort of the mass production of cards, and obviously, like so many others, I just got older, and high school, and interests changed. So pretty much stopped paying attention to cards up until COVID hit, and then one of my good friends from college had sort of caught the card bug and got me back into it. And it's just funny how sort of quickly it all came back to me. Obviously, a lot has changed since when I last collected in the 90s. So it took some time to understand the new brands and what people were after, and rating companies and other sort of nuances of the modern day card scene. But nonetheless, that's how I ended up back into the hobby, and I'm thrilled to be back in it.
What were some nuances and things that had changed in the hobby when you re-entered in the 2020s that you didn't see in the 1990s?
Sure, of course. I mean, I used to collect in the early 90s. So, I mean, baseball cards, Topps, Donruss, Fleer, you just have normal sets and cards are ordered. And all of a sudden, when I started paying attention to this, and I first started to look at basketball and football cards, and I'm trying to understand the difference between optic and prism and parallels and, snake skin and zebra. And it's just like the variations go on, and then numbered cards, patch cards, autos. Frankly, we didn't have any of those in the early 90s. So, so those are all sort of new and welcome changes to the hobby. I think so long as the card companies don't overproduce, which is always sort of that balance that we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, it seems like definitely agree with that. I mean, it seems like every single year, Panini prints more and more parallels. Like, there's Tiger Stripe Prism. Now there's, soon I bet there's gonna be like Tiger Stripe Optic, different color ices. There was this like other parallel that I saw in 2021, Topps Chrome. It's like a Indian pink sapphire. It has like a really long name. I had to Google what the parallel exactly meant. But it seems that there's new parallels coming out every year, which I think is definitely like a good thing. It's right. It's like a testament to the growth of the hobby, right? There is demand to support the increase in supply. But at the same time, it's like, it's a little bit makes people a little bit wary to kind of like go into like the oversupply issue that happened in the 1990s.
Yeah, and I would add something else, which is just again, just comparing it to when I was a kid. You want to get someone else involved in it. You show them, whatever card, Mattingly, a Ken Griffey Jr. At that time, you show them the tops and the upper deck mainly, and so now it's so much harder to get someone new into the hobby. Again, when there are, when Panini produces Lord knows how many different brands, and then all the parallels within the brands, it's a lot, and it's sort of intimidating. And I have some friends who have tried to get into it, and they're just overwhelmed with all of the optionality.
Yeah, someone should create like a flashcard set so that
Yeah,
people who enter the hobby can just go on Quizlet and flip over and kind of memorize all the parallels.
love it.
It's a new business idea. But speaking of business ideas, Zach,
Yeah,
uh, what is I've heard about this website called Hobby Exchange.
yeah.
Can you maybe tell me a little bit about this product that you've been working on?
Sure, sure. So again, just trying to rewind when I first got back into it in summer of 2020, was just learning about the different brands and how far we've come. But I think through the evolution that many others followed, you start to really refine what you're interested in, right? And so me personally, I started to go down the 90s insert rabbit hole and was looking at, you know, the coolest sort of insert sets from namely 97 and 98. And I found myself literally opening up 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 tabs to run the identical searches in, you know, eBay, PWCC, MySlabs, ComC, ... And so was just sort of ruminating on this problem for some time. I'm not a developer myself, but have a good buddy who is. He's a tennis friend of mine, and we were on the court one day, and I just sort of pitched him on the idea. I said, "Hey, you know, there's been a tremendous amount of venture capital that's come into the hobby over the past 24 months. This VC money has helped launch upwards of, you know, a dozen new marketplaces and platforms. However, there is no Google for the hobby. There's no Kayak. There's no comprehensive aggregator to help sort of coalesce all of these different listings." And so, you know, he's always up for a challenge, and I think he's done some search engine development in the past. And so we started to roll up our sleeves and design it, and it took a good 6 months to sort of wireframe it and talk through it, and then for him to figure out how to access all of the information, right? And so we ended up launching on January 1 of 2021. We were sort of doing a hacker's method of grabbing the data, and so but very quickly we found that the marketplaces wanted to befriend us. They wanted to play with us because, of course, if we can help send eyeballs their way, that's new business for them. And so over the past 8, 9 months now, we've been able to forge partnerships with 9 different marketplaces, eBay, PWCC, ComC, MySlabs, Prospect Cards, Alt, Heritage, Dibs, Golden. Sure, I'm leaving 1 or 2 out, but it's been awesome just to see companies sort of embrace our idea, because again, we didn't know if they were going to love us or hate us. And so it's been fun to work out these partnerships. My partner on the tech side has had to figure out, how to clean up the data and make sure that the data is presented properly, and that brings its own problems with it. But nonetheless, it's an iterative process, and we keep on trying to improve the platform. We keep on trying to improve listings, and we've at the same time gotten a ton of tremendous feedback from hobbyists. And so we're slowly trying to add some of those features. Just in time for nationals, we launched Save Search, which may seem like basic functionality, but we don't have any venture capital funding behind us. It's just sort of 2 friends building this out, and so it takes longer. But nonetheless, we have profiles and saved searches, and so we're just trying to build a better product, again, so that if you are a hobbyist and you're looking for a card, you don't have to open up 10 different tabs. You can go to one site and search all the different marketplaces at the same time to see what's out there.
Yeah, I think the ability to search all the marketplaces that are out there is extremely powerful. I have personally experienced this problem where it's like, I'm looking for a Lucas Silver Prism. There might be, a Lucas Silver Prism on eBay, right? But, there might be one on PWCC that is a couple $100s lower, right? So it's not only, I feel like in my experience, it hasn't only been a matter of finding the right card, but finding the right price, right? having like a 360-degree view of like all the price across all platforms.
Sure.
Because I think at the end of the day, like the market is still very inefficient. Same card across multiple platforms can have widely different prices.
It's totally true, and it's almost weird to say this, but sometimes eBay does have the cheapest price, and nonetheless, our service can provide sort of peace of mind for a consumer that hey, I actually can't find it cheaper elsewhere. And so again, being able to save time and just being able to have access to all the information at your fingertips is very powerful. And I think it's also worth noting that, you know, historically eBay's been the 800-pound gorilla, right? And over time, others have certainly taken some of that market share, and I think that will continue to happen. It's hard for any one company to continue to own the market so strongly. And so, having said that, there is space for PWCC and, you know, Golden and others to sort of elbow themselves in and be more of a player, which is all the more reason for why we can't just initially open up the eBay app. And so, you know, if there's any sort of habit that we're trying to fix here, it's that you think of a card and you instantly pull up the eBay app. And we love eBay and they have the most listings, but I think you're doing yourself a disservice if you're not searching all the marketplaces at once. Obviously biased, but that would be my preferred pathway for hobbyists.
Yeah, it's definitely like kind of like the more information you know, the more the more kind of like at peace you feel with your decision. And also, like, yeah, my friend and I were talking about this the other day. Like, there seems to be an industry trend where cards are being spread more and more across other marketplaces as these marketplaces are offering more and more incentives to vault cards, right? There seems to be this industry trend towards vaulting, because with vaulting, you kind of like can then capture fees on secondary auctions, stuff like that. So with like cards being pulled away from eBay, that gives kind of like more opportunity to a company like hobby.exchange, and you know, it's more and more important for customers to kind of know where all the cards are being stored and what they're priced at.
That's right. It's a super good point that you mentioned, because vaulting is very much this sort of sneaky way to try to steal market share from eBay. You know, whether it's PWCC or Golden or Alt, or now eBay themselves, they all know that to the extent they can control the physical product, that's going to help dictate future sales. And so it's sort of cool to see the hobby. I know some people despise this, but it's sort of cool to see the hobby go from being this sort of fun thing to more of a commodity, right? Where you know, like stocks and bonds. I don't own my own stocks and bonds. I keep them with a custodian, right? You know, Fidelity, Merrill Lynch, etc. And likewise, you see that happening in the hobby as well. Again, some people are not fans of this change, but look, when slabs are now worth 6 figures and up, some even 7 figures, it's critical to ensure that they're in the right hands, that they're insured, and they're protected and safe.
Yeah, and then you also see like, you know, especially an emphasis on the protection and safety aspect, right? Like collectors is now getting into the storage part as well. Like now you can have cards graded, and they like specifically specify, they're like, oh yeah, they're being stored in like our facility that has armed control 24 hours out of the day, security, right?
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, the storage aspect is really important as well.
Yeah, and even more so than storage, you know, I think what you just pointed to was I don't know how to say it, but just sort of taking kinks out of the process. And what I mean by that is, again, when I got back into the hobby, you have to learn all the steps involved, right? I got to go on a site like ComC and buy the raw, and then ship it to myself. And then once it's shipped, I have to review, sort of, you know, make sure the cards look nice, then fill out a PSA form and ship it to PSA. And then it's there for however long, and then it's shipped back to me. And then I got to go and take photos and then upload them to eBay, and then they sell, and then I ship them out. And there's a lot of steps in the process. And so to the extent that a company like Collectors can help take 1, 2, 3 steps out of the process, it really makes it a lot smoother, again, for those who are new to the hobby or just simply don't have the time required to handle all those steps themselves.
Right. I remember like filling in my first PSA form and I was just very, very intimidated. I like sent it to 3 friends to check for everything, to make sure that everything was good.
Same.
To the off chance I wouldn't even get my cards back. So yeah, let's talk about Hobby Exchange a little bit more. So what's the target audience for Hobby Exchange? Like, are you targeting like collectors, flippers? Yeah, like who's the main audience?
Yeah, I mean, generally it's any card buyer. But I would say that like the use case that I think most about is more of the hardcore hobbyist who's looking for that, whatever, red PMG out of 150, or, Topps Transcendent, or some hard to find set, or parallel, or insert that a simple search on eBay may not reveal. It may be in an alt vault. It could be sitting on ComC. It could be in PWCC. It could be at Golden up for auction. And so, again, it's so hard to corner the market for all this information. And so that's what we're trying to solve. And eventually, we're not quite there yet, but eventually we'd love to have notifications similar to eBay, right? Where you have whatever, that random hard to find Gretzky, numbered card from the late 90s that you can't find anywhere. And so you want to have an alert set up so that the moment it shows up on one of those 9 marketplaces, or perhaps even more once we continue to onboard others, then you're going to get pinged for it.
Yeah, that's definitely like kind of like if you watch a card or like a type of card, right, and then anything that kind of like falls into the search terms, anything that pops up would notify. I think that'd be really cool.
There's nothing more painful, and sometimes it's unavoidable, but there's nothing more painful in the hobby when you fall in love with something and you do a search and you go like through eBay's historicals and you see that the auction ended last night or last week, and it's a rare card, right? And you're just like, God, if only I had that in. But going through sort of those difficult experiences again can help create those sort of mental models to say, okay, I need to set a search for this so that to the extent it shows up on any of these 9 marketplaces, I can get pinged on it. And to be clear, we don't have that functionality yet. We have saved searches, so you can save the search on Hobby Exchange and run the search as often as you'd like. Hopefully sometime soon in the future we can roll out email notifications.
Do you guys cover auctions, or is it mainly buy it now?
Really good question. When we first started, I was adamant that it be buy it nows because auctions, because they're not apples to apples, right? Like buy it nows, if I have a buy it now on alts and on ComC, it's the same card, I can compare the prices. Auctions, of course, it's very tricky. If the auction's ending in 5 days, it could be at $5 now, and it may end at $3,000. So I was sort of adamant that it was only buy it now. And then very quickly, we got feedback in the first month that our number one feature that people desired were auctions. And so then we layered in auctions, but I'm glad we did it in that phased process because that forced us to separate the two. And so now when you run searches on Hobby Exchange, auctions and buy it nows are clearly distinguished between the two. And so again, that way you can know in your head that it's not apples to apples, of course, because the auction price is not reflective of what it's going to end at, depending on how much time is remaining.
I see. Okay. That makes sense. So it seems like it grabs prices at like any point in an auction, right? And as the price increases over time, it kind of updates along.
Exactly.
As bidders bid higher.
Right. And so it's somewhat harmful to the buy it nows because our default settings for our search is low to high. And so if you're running a search for a certain card, that's going to be the one that pops up first. But nonetheless, auctions are sort of drive activity and behavior, right? I mean, we all sort of get giddy for an auction, we get amped for it, and whether or not it ends at the right price and whether or not we participate is a different story. But obviously, there's something sort of psychological about auctions that excites us, or else it would just all be buy it now purchases.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, like the excitement surrounding auctions is definitely true. Like last weekend we saw the Mantle end for 12.6 million in Heritage. I certainly wasn't going to buy that myself, but I was still watching it, and I'm sure other people were, right? So I think yeah, it does kind of create a sense of community, and it's a cool spectator sport, right? You get some sort of enjoyment from watching other people duke it out on a really rare or exciting card.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. But hey, just switching gears, would love to just briefly talk about Veriswap. One of the issues that, again, my partner and I talked about very early on was just this issue where hobbyists are very often what I call, card rich and cash poor, right? We have so many funds locked up in cards, and yet we still have that passion and thrill to continue buying, but we may not have the available cash to do so. So, when we connected at Nationals, I was super stoked to learn about your service. And as we discussed, it was an idea that I talked about with my partner early on, because there's just something very exciting about trading. I don't know what it is, but whether it's like fantasy football or whether it brings me back to when I was a kid and used to trade cards with friends, it's just fun to sort of wheel and deal, and there hasn't been anything quite like it in the hobby yet. So just would love to just sort of pivot to where you guys are at, and then after would of course love to talk about ways that we can possibly help support each other's services and maybe even work out some functionality in between the two on the tech platforms.
Yeah, definitely would be open to talking about that. So I guess for those of you guys who don't know, Veriswap is a marketplace where users can swap cards with each other. We are also an escrow/middleman service that handles both sides of transactions. So when a transaction is negotiated and complete on the Veriswap platform, both sides will ship packages to our headquarters, fully insured. We'll inspect the packages and ship them out to the correct party. And this is like you said, like it was a problem that I personally experienced. I've been trading cards for upwards of 3 to 4 years now. Had a lot of trouble managing my inventory. Had a lot of trouble manually negotiating deals. And my favorite part of like the shows and where I met you, Zach, was actually at trade night, right? Like I would go to shows just for the trade night. I was like always like a little bit sad every time like the trade night ended because I want to trade more, but I was going home, right? So for selfish reasons, I want to bring the trade night experience back home, and it's currently the product is fully released. We released a trading feature about 3 weeks ago. We have a good number of trades on there, and we're looking towards creating more trade related content. So we're creating some sort of Instagram post where we kind of like have people debate over like which side do you think got the better deal. We're still trying to work out exactly how we want to move down the road. But we're also in the process of building an iOS app so that it's more mobile friendly for users.
That's super cool to hear. Yeah, it's fun to debate it after, right? And the same thing happens with NFL trades or NBA trades, right? And so it's also interesting just to sort of weigh in, like, if someone wants to trade a Mantle for a Tatis, and it's just you have one player who's deceased and his stats aren't changing, and the other's in whatever his 3rd or 4th year in the league, and so it's just interesting to compare sort of how, obviously it's not always about the money, and so but you can judge it by that, or sometimes someone's just very excited about having a certain player in their collection, and so they wouldn't mind trading a card that may have more value for it. But I just totally 100% agree with you that trade nights are just the best part about going to nationals. When I went to my first nationals in 2021, that while it was fun to roam the floor of nationals, those trade nights were just so cool. It was, not to sound cheesy, but it's just cool to like see the sort of flicker in folks' eyes when they're sharing their collection and they're proud of it. And then you show them yours. And most of the time there's no match whatsoever. But when there is, and you find someone else and you guys can geek out over similar interests, that's awesome. And so, again, why I'm so psyched about your service is because if I'm at trade night and I talk to 50 different people, I may only find 10% that are interested in 90s basketball inserts. But if I go on your site, I can directly find those folks who have a similar interest, right? And so like anything, a Web 2 marketplace can help just make life so much easier and provide folks with sort of the answers that they're looking for.
Exactly. One of my motivations for kind of like creating this marketplace is also like I used to trade a lot on Facebook and Instagram, but on those two platforms, you're limited by how many cards can fit into the feed, and there's not really a search function, or like the search function is like very poorly done, right? So hopefully by like having the cards on like a centralized platform, it'll be easier to navigate. People kind of like hobby exchange, right? Like just having more visibility into like what's out there.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've considered this too, but like I think a lot of card purchases are made, what's the word? They're not intentional purchases. It's like you kind of see it and you're like, oh, that's a really cool card that I didn't even know existed. And I didn't know I wanted it. But now I see it, I really, really want it. Right? Happens to me at every show. I would say a lot of like in my experience, like from people who like buy and sell with me, like that happens a lot. So I think like capturing that segment of the market is going to be key, both for hobby exchange and for Veriswap.
Yeah, and I would just add that again. I think that the difference between your service and others is if I go on Instagram and I see very cool feeds that I follow, those cards may not be for sale and may never be for sale, right? And so to the point, to your point that you find something you love, well, if it's not for sale, then it's sort of a bummer, especially if it's very rare. Of course, when you go on a platform like yours, everything is tradable, right? And so it's sort of like game on.
Yeah, exactly. That was the thing, right? Like when you trade on Instagram, you see people post stuff. You message them, and it's like, oh, it's PC, or oh, I had this 3 months ago, I no longer have this,
right?
Or it's part of someone else's collection now, right?
Right. It's people forget that Instagram. So I'll put out a plug. I'm a big fan of an app called NextGem. I'm friendly with the founders, and that was sort of their goal, is to have a more current like collection feed, where, because to your point, Instagram is in chronological order. And so on my personal Instagram, on my personal card account on Instagram, I have cards on there. I have photos on there of cards that I haven't owned in 18 months. And so it's important that services besides Instagram can attack that problem and show what's actually in someone's current, what they currently own.
Exactly. Yeah. I think at the end of the day, like it is a collector's game, right? Like if you really like what you own, you want to show it to the world. Even if you don't have it anymore, you just want I actually first heard this from Eric Myers, right? Like you kind of get enjoyment from owning the card, right? And you look at the card, photo of you holding the card, like that's enough to make you happy, even if you like don't own the card anymore. So I think like that's why there's so many like photos on Instagram of people who they might not necessarily own the card anymore, but it's still there because it's cool to see.
Yeah, that's a good point. I never quite thought about it, but it's true. You sort of have a nostalgia for cards that you had to part with, but that still sort of hold a place in your heart. So it's nice to have sort of that record of what you did own.
Exactly. Yeah. Good to kind of scroll back. Like even now, like I scroll back onto my feed and I see like cards that I owned, 1, 2, 3 years ago. I remember the first card that I owned was a 2013 Giannis Select patch auto.
Oh, wow.
And like I look back and I'm like, oh, that's really, really cool. And like one day I want to buy back that exact copy. I still haven't found it yet, but
cool.
one day I want to one day I want to grab it again.
Well, there's a site that you can go on. You can look across all the marketplaces to see if it's out there.
I think I've heard of it once or twice. In terms of like future plans, in the next let's say in the next 3 months, what do you want to accomplish with Hobby Exchange?
Yeah, well, there's some very short-term plans, like want to redo the homepage. And so that's been something that we've been talking about, but it just, it's sort of next up on the list. We've had to attack a bunch of problems prior to. So that's a very short-term issue that we want to solve, because ultimately we want to help sort of curate and again drive traffic to these different auction houses. So to be able to do that, we need to have a dynamic homepage that is showing what's happening right now. And so, for instance, if there's a heritage auction ending this Saturday, and if there's a alt liquid auction ending the following Thursday, and if there's a PWCC monthly ending the following Thursday, we'll want to be able to showcase what's happening at any given time, because search serves its function, but if you don't know what you're searching for, then you can't search it, right? And so that's why we want to help sort of curate and help what I just refer to as discovery. How can we help people just discover cool stuff that's out there? So that's sort of the next big feature / infrastructure build, which is a redesign of the homepage. After that, this is somewhat taboo to mention, but want to start focusing more on digital assets. I say it's taboo because there's a lot of just old school folks who just sees cardboard as really the only option. And there's, way too many like YouTube videos of people debating NFTs versus cards. And so, I don't look at it like that. I think especially younger generations who are growing up with crypto, and are familiar with NFTs, to them, it's probably not even a huge difference between cardboard and an NFT. And so want to do a better job on the digital asset side as more and more sports related digital assets launch. Want to be able to help cover those and include those in our searches. Sort of insider news that most probably didn't pay attention to, but eBay actually bought an NFT platform over the summer. Don't know if they've built that into their functionality and what their game plan is, but as the biggest player in the hobby, I think that's a pretty sort of meaningful step that occurred. And so we want to be sure that we're on the forefront of that. There was actually a really good session at the Nationals where it was some of the folks from the Card Talk podcast and from the Luca Tiger Braun podcast and others who were talking about sports NFTs. And it just sort of opened my eyes. And so anyways, that's a long answer to your question, but want to shift more to digital assets so that we're covering sort of all sides of the collector's quest.
Shift more digital assets. I see. I certainly think that there's a lot of crossover between like sports card collectors and like NFT / digital asset collectors on paper. And I think that there could be a lot of like, hate to use this word, but like cross-pollination between the two, right? Like, like a lot of sports card collectors getting into NFTs and NFT collectors getting into sports cards.
Exactly.
Right. And like to be the platform that like bridges those two, and connects the two, like I think would be really, really interesting. And I bet no one's doing that right now. Right.
Yeah.
Like this could be the bridge between like Web 2 and Web 3, or like, physical assets in Web 3.
Yeah, that would certainly be our goal. I would say that as hobbyists, it always feels like we're being inundated from those in the NFT world, right? And a lot of people, again, just sort of reject it. But it was cool to flip it on its face. And what I mean by that is I went to VCon back in May. It was Gary Vaynerchuk's NFT conference. It was here in my hometown, and it was really cool because he had a whole section. I forget the name for it, but it was like Collector's Alley or something like that. And it was all, sports cards, right? It was sports cards, memorabilia. A lot of the brands that you and I know were there, Slab Stocks and Golden and others. And so it was cool to see it flipped, where it was literally saying, okay, here are 10,000 attendees here for NFTs. They're not here to talk about sports cards,
Right.
but how can we maybe get them interested in sports cards? And so it was cool to see it happening from the other way. And like, and the perfect connector was actually, Gary V licensing his VeeFriends to Zero Cool, which is, the Fanatics non-sports brand. And so there were VeeFriend NFT holders at the conference who were there, and they, for the first time, saw VeeFriends cards printed by Zero Cool, and they were buying them. And it was just cool to see that happen sort of in the reverse.
Yeah, so that kind of brings another idea to mind, right? It's like you kind of saw like the VeeFriend digital asset holders starting to get to VeeFriends physical cards, and it's like, okay, they might happen to like basketball too, right? Okay, then we'll start by investing in a few like basketball physical cards, right? And it just kind of like goes to like kind of like back to the physical. But I think it'd be cool to kind of like see the reverse happen too. I'm not really sure like how big the Web3 or like the digital asset market is, but I assume it's like pretty massive, if not bigger than cards. So
it is, and that's the crazy part, is that in such a short period of time, it has eclipsed sports cards. And I mean, the data point I'm going to is OpenSea, which is basically the eBay of NFTs. And OpenSea allegedly did 15 billion in sales and in volume last year. And so when you compare that to eBay, which I believe their run rate was maybe 5 billion for sports cards. And so, it's 3x. And so again, sort of my hope is that some of these artificial lines start to blur, especially as eBay starts directly selling NFTs. And, look, if you've messed around with Top Shot or Candy, or So Rare, or some of these other services that are licensing with the leagues to produce NFTs of moments, it's pretty cool actually, right? Because in our minds, like, you only will own, I'll own to your point, the Giannis 2014 Select, right? And
yep.
like, that's his card of Select for that year. Well, if Giannis has, 30 incredible plays during the NBA season, you can turn all those into NFTs. You can own that specific play. So I think that's sort of cool in its own right.
Yeah, that's certainly really exciting. I think there is definitely a ton of potential. Like, there's no question about that. I'm just curious to see how it all plays out between the two different markets. But we are running short on time. And it was great talking today, Zach.
Likewise.
How can people find you if they want to reach out, whether it's about your collection or questions about Hobby Exchange or any feedback on the platform in general?
Yeah, thank you. We're on Twitter and Instagram are the two best sort of social networks to find us. Hobby.exchange on Instagram. You can of course visit us at hobby.exchange. Which is what I would encourage everyone to do. Check it out. We still sort of consider ourselves to be in beta. So we appreciate any feedback on the site, feature requests, any constructive criticism that folks have. So feel free to reach out. You can send us an email at hello@hobby.exchange. So, again, we're just sort of here to help the hobby and help make it easier for folks to be able to find the cards that they're searching for, so that they don't have to open up 10 different tabs. And so, hopefully this is something that can catch on. As you know, it's hard to sort of get your name out there when you don't have a large marketing budget. And so we're trying to do what we can to get our names out there. And so just a huge thank you to you for showcasing our product. It means a ton to us. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to have you on today, Zach, and I'm excited to see the future of Hobby Exchange. For those of you guys listening, the URL is hobby.exchange. I believe there's no .com, right? It's just hobby.exchange.
Correct.
Correct. Cool. Yeah, check it out. Let us know in the comments what you think, and we'll talk later, Zach.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
Have a good one.
See ya.